How can you act so high and mighty when you're selling a $45 bedazzled water bottle to your fans when we're on the brink of a full-blown recession? Hi there, my name is Tessa, and in case you somehow missed it, Taylor Swift recently released a new album, and people have thoughts.
You don't understand. It's because she's a billionaire that her life is so hard. It's a perspective no one's had before.
The Life of a Showgirl is the kind of album that you release under an authoritarian regime.
Loving him was red, but being on his podcast was orange.
I personally wouldn't describe myself as a Swiftie, because obsessing over someone who doesn't know I exist isn't really my idea of a fun time. But like anyone my age, I've danced and cried to my fair share of her music. And whether you love her or hate her, I think it's fair to say that she's one of the most influential musicians of the 21st century, at the very least from a marketing perspective. Taylor first burst onto the scene in 2006 when she was just a teenager, and with her blonde curls, country twang, and hopeless romanticism, it was very easy for her to claim the title of America's sweetheart. Her early albums explored the highs and lows of love and adolescence, universal experiences that resonated with a lot of people, including myself, and Speak Now is still one of my comfort albums. By 2014, Taylor had adopted a more conventional pop star persona, trading Nashville for New York, sundresses for sequins, and her hometown friends for supermodels. Because she was such a prominent public figure, her relationships were pretty heavily publicized, and the media started portraying her as a boy-crazy serial dater, conveniently forgetting that many male celebrities were doing the exact same thing without being called sluts. Her immense popularity was a double-edged sword, however, and she got lumped in with pumpkin spice lattes and rosé as the basic and boring choice. Hating her became the radical option, a way of proving to the world that you weren't like other girls. Taylor was acutely aware of how the tides were shifting and decided to flip the script herself, with the 1989 album poking fun at her public persona and people's obsession with her love life.
We may have different circumstances surrounding our lives and different sources of gossip. Theirs is like whispers in school hallways or rumors at work, and mine is on the newsstand when I check out at the grocery store.
You're going to walk home with more than maybe just a trophy tonight. I think lots of men.
I'm not going to walk home with any men tonight. I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, and then I go home to the cats.
No men allowed.
Men get me in trouble.
We don't live just in a celebrity takedown culture. We live in a takedown culture. People will find anything about you and twist it to where it's weird or wrong or annoying or strange or bad.
This project produced hit after hit after hit, which seemed to only heighten the public's opinion that she was overrated. And in 2016, they fully turned against her. This was largely credited to her feud with Kanye West and his then-wife Kim Kardashian, who claimed that Taylor had given her approval for a lyric in Kanye's song Famous, while she insisted that she wasn't aware that she'd be referred to as a bitch. Around the same time, Taylor was also in the midst of a legal battle with former DJ David Mueller, who alleged that she had gotten him fired after reporting him for sexual assault. These scenarios fed into the narrative that she was calculating, manipulative, and had a victim complex. And because of all this backlash, she stepped out of the public eye. She returned in 2017 with Reputation, which stands out amongst the rest of her discography due to its angrier, edgier direction, which explored themes of revenge, betrayal, empowerment, and of course, romance. Taylor had employed Easter eggs since the start of her career, starting simply enough with secret messages in her lyric books, but with Reputation pulling so much from her public image, she became a lot more self-referential, hiding clues to her personal life and future projects in music videos, Instagram posts, and red carpet outfits. For her fans, this was sort of a game, and it bred an even more parasocial relationship where thousands of people were competing to see who knew Taylor Swift best.
Okay, stop.
Stop.
Okay, stop.
Stop.
Okay, stop.
Pause here.
Okay, stop.
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 Stop here.
In 2019, she left her label, Big Machine Records, after the two were unable to reach an agreement regarding the ownership of her earlier projects, and the company was subsequently acquired by music manager and businessman Scooter Braun. This gave Scooter control over Taylor's masters, which she was pretty unhappy about, as it put her life's work in the hands of someone she openly distrusted. Her next album, Lover, not only explored her relationship with Joe Alwyn, but also political issues, particularly feminism, with Taylor arguing that her treatment by the public, media, and music industry over the years was rooted in misogyny. Although she wasn't as widely reviled as she was back in 2016, the public wasn't totally Team Swift either, with her new songs being described as cringy, her political activism shallow, and even her dancing subpar. But in 2020, she became even more dedicated to rehabilitating her image. This began with the Miss America documentary, which took a look at Taylor's life during some of her biggest scandals, and the film was praised for its vulnerability and honesty. Due to the COVID lockdowns, Taylor had to scrap her initial plans for the year, but that worked out in her favor, as it led to the creation of Evermore and Folklore, which were critically and commercially acclaimed. The albums were more story-driven than Taylor's previous work, taking inspiration from historical figures and classic novels, as opposed to her personal life. These projects were notable for their more simplistic, stripped-down direction, which had a sort of somber, bittersweet tone that really captured the sentiment of the COVID era and earned renewed respect for her lyricism. In 2021, she began releasing the re-recorded versions of her back catalog, which apart from updated vocals, also included songs that had been scrapped the first time around, providing additional insight into situations fans had long theorized about, one of the most discussed being her relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal. The Taylor's version projects performed remarkably well, successfully diminishing the value of the masters that Scooter Braun was holding onto. And in 2023, she embarked on the Eras Tour, which served as a celebration of her entire career. It subsequently became the highest-grossing tour of all time, and even had an impact on politics and economics worldwide, which resulted in her being named Times Person of the Year, the first and only person in the arts to receive the honor so far. Between 2006 and 2019, Taylor released a total of 7 albums, but in the 2020s alone, she's released 9 if you include the re-recordings, essentially doubling her entire discography in a third of the time. That's Marvel-level output. And it isn't surprising to hear that some of her fans are starting to feel a little bit of burnout. This brings us to her most recent release, The Life of a Showgirl. Based on the title alone, I was expecting something a little bit theatrical. Some brassy jazz instruments, sexy strings, a little old Hollywood drama. Basically Wildest Dreams, but if it were a little more burlesque. Instead, it's the same faux philosophical pop I've come to expect from her lately, where she just repeats the same familiar stories about being wronged, shaking off the hate, getting revenge, and finding the one. Taylor has been working with a lot of the same people for years now. Not that I blame her, because camaraderie can make the experience significantly more pleasant, just not necessarily the most productive. When you're the most powerful person in every single room that you walk into, people stop telling you no. But good art needs conflict and collaboration, someone to challenge you, to make you look at something in a new way, to make you see something differently, not just nod along the entire time.
Well, you know, there's different songs about different things. I mean, I'll be the first one to stand up and say, look, I'm 17, never gotten married or had a kid. I'm not going to write songs about that.
Right.
But I will write about what I have been through or what my friends have been through.
I'm really in touch with my fans and I know what they like. What my fans in general were afraid of was that I would start making pop music and I would stop writing smart lyrics, or I would stop writing emotional lyrics.
We've seen how Taylor's life experiences have influenced her music over the years, with her move to New York leading to the self-discovery of 1989, her scandals, the resentment of Reputation, and the pandemic, the escapism of Folklore and Evermore. But what is she taking inspiration from now? Nothing new, apparently, considering we've heard it all before. I mean, just look at Love Story versus Opalite. They were written 16 years apart, but Taylor is still fantasizing about being rescued by love. That isn't just deja vu, it's derivative.
You know, different emotions, and if I had one about being angry, I wasn't going to put another one on that's about being angry. If I had one about, you know, missing somebody, I wasn't going to put another one on about that. I tried to cover all bases but not get repetitive so that nobody would be able to pigeonhole me and say, oh, this album's all about this or all about that.
When Beyoncé released Lemonade in 2016, she was a wife and a mother. Obviously, neither of those things are all a woman is, but they certainly have a big impact on your life, and that's very clear in the direction of the album. For example, compare the lyrics of Irreplaceable versus Don't Hurt Yourself 10 years later. They both call out a cheating partner, but one kicks him out of the house, while the other is a warning to not do it again, acknowledging that things aren't as simple when the cheater is also the father of your children. The same personal and musical evolution can also be seen in Ariana Grande's discography. Thank You Next is a humorous acknowledgement of her failed relationships, while Positions was a celebration of her engagement, and Eternal Sunshine dealt with the aftermath of her divorce. None of these projects are interchangeable with one another, having a distinctly different sound and message, that make it clear that she was in vastly different headspaces for each. Whereas if you look at some of Taylor's recent releases, there isn't much that differentiates them from each other. And I honestly think that Life of a Showgirl just sounds like Midnight's 2.0. One of my theories for this lack of growth is that when compared to some of her musical peers, she hasn't had some of those big transitional life moments that impact you spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. Again, motherhood and marriage aren't requirements for anyone. But based on what we know about Taylor Swift, those are things she wants. It's just taken her more time to get there than she expected. And unfortunately, that means that some of the lovey-dovey things that we've heard her say about Travis Kelce, we've heard her say before, a bit more poetically as well.
This is sort of what I've been writing songs about wanting to happen to me since I was a teenager.
Not to mention that by constantly revisiting the past for the re-recordings, she's put herself in a state of arrested development, where she's lingering in a mindset and moment that she should have otherwise moved on from. Now, I acknowledge that there's a sort of double standard when it comes to female musicians, where they're expected to reinvent themselves far more frequently than their male counterparts. But I'd argue that the male musicians who are considered some of the greats, like David Bowie, Bob Dylan, Billy Joel, or Michael Jackson, did switch things up pretty frequently, and are remembered all the better for it. The fact that Taylor wasn't just imagining the experiences that she was writing about in her songs, but actually living them, was a big selling point early in her career. And when I was younger, I definitely related to the things that she was going through. But at this point in my life, it kind of feels like I've outgrown her. I just have way more important things to do than stress about a boy liking me back or having beef with old friends. Speaking of which, for the last few years, it seemed as though Taylor was relatively drama-free, but trouble seems to be brewing between her and fellow musician charliXCX. Once upon a time, the two were actually pretty close, with Charli serving as an opening act for the Reputation tour back in 2018, but the relationship seems to have soured in the years since.
Thank you to my tour mates charliXCX and Camila Cabello.
Charli's song, Sympathy is a Knife, off of her 2024 Brat album, had the lyrics, "I don't want to see her backstage at my boyfriend's show, fingers crossed behind my back, I hope they break up quick," which was rumored to be referring to Taylor. Charli had been in a relationship with George Daniel, the drummer of the 1975, whose lead singer, Maddie Healy, was seeing Taylor around the same time. So people connected the dots and interpreted it as a dig. But if you actually pay attention to the song, it's pretty obvious that it's about Charli's own anxieties and insecurities, and not any real resentment about the person that she's mentioning. Taylor seemingly responded with the song Actually Romantic, which has the lyrics, "I heard you call me boring Barbie when the cokes got you brave. High-fived my ex, and then said you're glad he ghosted me." Taylor rarely confirms who a song is about, even when it's incredibly obvious. And all she's said about Actually Romantic so far is, quote, "It's about realizing that someone else kind of has a one-sided, adversarial relationship with you that you didn't know about." While she might be playing coy about it, there are enough hints that I think it's fair to assume that, yeah, it's about Charli. Especially since the entire Brat album was basically about partying, with one of the vinyls even being filled with a mysterious white powder. Taylor isn't exactly new to diss tracks, having written songs about a good amount of her exes, as well as her personal feuds within the industry. Better Than Revenge is about Camilla Belle, Bad Blood is about Katy Perry, Look What You Made Me Do is about Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, and Actually Romantic is just the latest instance of her putting her feelings to paper. Like I already mentioned, one of the biggest criticisms of Taylor Swift is that she has a victim complex, but I feel like this is a pretty normal part of the industry. And it didn't seem like anyone had any issues with that when Kendrick Lamar and Drake were going back and forth. Now, plenty of musicians are wealthy, but very few have made it into the Billionaires Club. And of those, Taylor is effectively the only one whose wealth is predominantly from music, meaning no makeup or alcohol brands inflating the numbers. On one hand, I've got to give her props for genuinely being such a good businesswoman, but on the other hand, I have to wonder if she's prioritizing quantity over quality.
These are the 4 deluxe editions of this album, and each one contains 30 pages of my diary entries from my life.
After years of Easter eggs, secret sessions, and friendship bracelets, it's no surprise that Taylor's fans have trouble discerning the difference between what's personal and promotional. Now, they're not the only ones, just look at the Barbs, Blinks, and Arianators, but where the Swifties seem to differ is that unlike other fandoms, which are often made up entirely of teenagers, Taylor appeals to almost every age group, as evidenced by the turnout at her concerts, with just as many 30-year-olds showing up as 13-year-olds. Their devotion to her is honestly a little disconcerting at times, not only refusing to listen to any criticisms people may have of her, but also buying every single thing with her name on it. And I'm not sure how her fandom doesn't realize that she's exploiting their relationship with her to increase her wealth. Now, I think it would be unfair to pin the blame on Taylor Swift for the increase in vinyl variants over the years, especially considering it's been going on since before she was born, as evidenced by Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which had over a dozen reissues over the course of the 1970s. But she does seem to be the artist most dedicated to the tactic, with The Life of a Showgirl already having more than 30 variants at this point. Even people in the industry have pointed out how ridiculous it's gotten, with Billie Eilish saying, quote, "Some of the biggest artists in the world keep making fucking 40 different vinyl packages that have a different unique thing just to get you to keep buying more. It's so wasteful, and it's irritating to me that we're still at a point where you care that much about your numbers and you care that much about making money. Once you amass a certain amount of wealth, you kind of forget what life is like for normal people." And I personally think that Taylor Swift has hit that point. I mean, back in 2020, she criticized Scooter Braun's unapproved release of her live album as, quote, "another case of shameless greed in the time of coronavirus." Meanwhile, just 5 years later, she's hawking a dozen different versions of the exact same product. How can you act so high and mighty when you're selling a $45 bedazzled water bottle to your fans when we're on the brink of a full-blown recession? Taylor Swift isn't just a celebrity. She's a billion-dollar brand, so I don't expect her to be involved with the development or approval of every single thing related to her. That's 100 other people's jobs. But her team should be keeping a closer eye on what's rolling out, because the fact that they let Google release a series of promotional videos using generative AI isn't great. Like, she's way too rich to be this cheap. Not only could they have hired an actual artist, who no doubt would have done a better job, but it also makes Taylor look like a bit of a hypocrite. In the past, she's not only talked about the importance of paying creatives for their work, but has also been a victim of deep-faked explicit images. So you would think that her stance on AI would be pretty cut and dry. But once again, it kind of seems like one of those situations where she really only cares if it impacts her. Not to mention that by using AI in her brand, she opens herself up to accusations of AI usage in other aspects of her work, like her songs, which were already being accused of being so generic and predictable that there's an entire subsection of TikTok dedicated to Taylor Swift parodies. Considering how massive her fan base is, she's probably secured a spot at the top of the charts for the rest of her life. But I also wonder if that's made her less willing to take creative risks. Like, if you know for a fact that you can do the exact same thing over and over and over again, and people will still eat it up, why would you ever be incentivized to try anything different? What are your thoughts on Taylor Swift's new album? That's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!